Back in January I took a look at some of my favourite PSP ports, and it's safe to say that the video did quite well. In fact, it became my most viewed video within just a few weeks. I think one of the main reasons for that is just how universally loved the handheld was, and just how impressive its capabilities were to all of us at the time, and still are to this day. The comments on the video are flooded with suggestions of other insane PSP ports, so of course I had to make a part 2. I've decided to pick some of my personal favourites from those suggestions and talk about them today. There are still tons of ports out there, not only for the PSP but other consoles as well, so if you have any suggestions let me know in the comments. But without further ado, let's take a look at some more insane PSP ports. First up is one of the most legendary racing game franchises of all time, that of course being Colin McRae Rally. The Colin McRae Rally series started all the way back in 1998 on the PlayStation 1, and even back then the game was truly groundbreaking for its time, with its impressive visuals, or should I say imprezza visuals. Sorry, that won't happen again. What I'm trying to say is that the Colin McRae series and all its spiritual successors have always been a good way to showcase what a console is truly capable of, pushing them to their absolute limits to give some of the best racing games of the past 3 decades, and Colin McRae 2005 is no different. I'll be honest, I didn't have many memories of playing this iteration of the series too much. I do remember playing a Colin McRae game on the PSP, and I think other than Dirt 2, this was the only one, so it must have been this. First things first, let's take a look at the console release. The game has a few modes for you to try out: a standard quick play mode, a championship mode where you play as Colin McRae, and then a career mode. A more in-depth mode where you can pick your own cars and upgrade them as you play through your own career. The modes are exactly the same on both versions, you get the full experience on the PSP. The PS2 version obviously looks better, and it's probably one of the best looking racing games of that time, probably only beaten by Gran Turismo 4 in my opinion. Another interesting thing is the small details in the world. As you race along you can drive over the thin barriers, or when you hit a tree the leaves will fall from it, and the spectators will move out the way if you get a bit too close. Notice how most of these things involve colliding with things you're not supposed to? Yeah, I'm not great at rally games, and most of these little details carry over onto the PSP version. And the gameplay still feels great considering it came out in 2004. Even though I'm not great at it, I can tell that for someone with a bit more skill this would be a lot easier to pick up and play. Everything just feels quite snappy and responsive. The game also has a cockpit view, which isn't the best but still quite impressive for a PS2 title, and I only bring it up because it was surprisingly brought into the PSP version, which is basically unheard of, so props to the developers for doing that. So let's talk about the PSP version. The game was a launch title for the console back in September of 2005, and I'm just going to say now, this is how you flex the power of your new handheld compared to the competition. The N-Gage and DS just wouldn't compete with this. Just look at those car models for a portable console that released in 2005, that is just insane. As for the actual visuals during gameplay, I didn't notice much difference between the two versions. Sure, there's minor things like a lot less spectators on the screen, which have been replaced with those really pixelated fake crowd, and the particle effects aren't that good, but overall it's not a massive drop off. As you're seeing it on screen, it's probably very noticeable, but playing them back to back, I really didn't mind the way the PSP version looked at all. The gameplay is still just as good, which I guess is the main thing. It still feels like every rally game does. Dark Souls in racing form. One thing I didn't realise until researching it is that the PSP version does have a bug which happens when steering with the PSP's analog analog nub, making the cars a nightmare to control. This only happens when the nub has a bit of wear and tear over time, which these things were built using Weetabix and toothpicks, so you were lucky if you had a fully functioning one. Anyway, you still get all the tracks and massive selection of cars to use in quick play and career mode. Overall, I didn't realise that this game was a launch title, which obviously it is. It's called Colin McRae 2005, but that just makes it even better. The fact that the players got a full console experience straight out the gate probably solidified the handheld's legacy very early on, and it still holds up surprisingly well today, 21 years later. Damn, 21 years? All that time? You'd think I'd know how to go around a fucking corner by now? Next up is probably one of the most slept on movie tie-in games of all time, which also has probably the worst name of a video game in history. I am of course talking about Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie. Why they didn't just call it Big Pete's House of Kong, I'll never know. Back in the day I went through a phase of being absolutely obsessed with King Kong. I even watched a really old movie from the 1930s and watched the version the game was based on my PSP. I think it came on 2 UMD discs. A bit of a tangent, but it's so crazy that in just a few years we went from these bulky portable DVD players to having a device that could play AAA games, be an MP3 player and basically be a widescreen portable DVD player all in one. The PSP is definitely the GOAT. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, Big Pete's House of Kong. Let's check it out.
Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie.
The game is really interesting to talk about because even though it released on absolutely every console back in the day, they really tried to make each version exactly the same. Even the DS version, which obviously struggled to keep up, but the fact that you're essentially getting the same experience on the PSP as the 360 version is really impressive, especially considering the game came out in 2005. The way the developers made it work on the portable console is really impressive, so let's take a look. But for this, I'll only be comparing the PS2 and PSP versions, as I want to do a separate video on ports of the 7th gen games to PSP. First thing I notice straight out the gate is that the opening scene in the game is swapped out for a cutscene in the PSP version. On the PS2 you can look around, but on the PSP it's just a video. This would happen a lot with ports, where they'll rip a cutscene straight out the console version and use it on the less powerful hardware. And I don't mind it, it makes the game feel almost identical to the home console version, and at the time I had the game on the OG Xbox and PSP, so it felt like I was getting the same experience. An interesting thing about the game is how it's separated into two different parts. One is a first person shooter, almost survival horror like game, and the second part you play as Kong, as you get to destroy absolutely everything in your path. It's essentially Resident Evil Requiem if Leon was replaced with a 30-foot gorilla. In the console version you start the game and have a few NPCs with you on the journey to help you open doors and follow the story of the movie a bit more accurately, whereas the PSP version takes them out and you're now stranded on Skull Island by yourself, which in my opinion makes this game way more creepy and feel like a traditional survival horror, and I'll be honest, it's fucking terrifying. After playing both versions, I soon realised that mission layouts changed quite a bit. Obviously the console version had more segments to include the AI teammates, which I kept forgetting about because I had just played the PSP version. Graphics wise, it's not that bad. There's not a massive fall off in terms of graphics between the two versions. The environments still look decent. I'd say the only thing that's noticeable is the bigger enemies look way more blockier on the PSP, but compared to the DS version, it looks like DLSS 5 is on. The gameplay in both versions is very similar. Obviously the PSP only had one analog stick, so I opted for the face buttons as camera movement, which after playing with it for 5 minutes, it's not that bad, especially when the hitboxes are quite generous. The controls have been moved around a little, due to the lack of L2, R2 and a second analog stick, but it doesn't really dampen the experience at all. I haven't really spoken about the Kong segments, and that is down to the fact that they're a bit of a novelty. Little platforming segments with a bit of fighting. It's clear that the main chunk of the game is focused on the first person shooter part, and that is absolutely fine, because the atmosphere, the controls, the lack of any HUD really makes this game such a great survival horror experience. I'd even argue that the PSP version makes it a bit more intense due to the lack of Jack Black following you around. Overall, King Kong is probably one of the best movie tie-in games ever created. It's rare that you get a game that really builds the world from whatever they're trying to adapt with this much accuracy and makes you feel like you're exploring it for yourself, but Ubisoft definitely hit it out the park. This was also back when Ubisoft were actually interested in making good games. If this was released nowadays, I'd probably have to log into Ubisoft Club every 5 minutes and have the game ripped from my library after the licensing ran out. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you're still here, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. We're so close to 1000 subscribers, so if you could be one of those 180 people to subscribe, that would mean a lot. And it's also the best way to keep up to date on the channel to see what videos I'm working on next, with a new full-length video every single month. Thank you for supporting the channel. Now let's get back to the video. Now from one game based on a movie franchise to another, I am of course talking about Star Wars Battlefront 2, which come to think of it, Star Wars has to be the one movie franchise with the most games based on the IP. There's hundreds of them, and 90% of them are bangers, especially the one I'm talking about today. Now I'll admit, I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan when it comes to the movies. I only know the story and characters because of the Family Guy parody, but when it comes to Star Wars games, I couldn't get enough of them in the 2000s. Jedi Academy, Revenge of the Sith, and of course the Lego games were among some of my favourites. But in 2006, I got a little game on my PSP known as Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Star Wars Battlefront 2 on November 1st. You fight again.
The original Battlefront games were made by Pandemic Studios, who also made two of my personal favourite games of all time, that being Mercenaries and Destroy All Humans. Man, with a catalogue like this, why did they ever shut down? Oh yeah, that makes sense. After the first Battlefront became a massive success, the sequel would release just a year later, but this time around, the game would have a port to the PSP. If you've never played Battlefront 2, it's essentially a multiplayer focused third person shooter, similar to games like Battlefield, with big open maps with 64 players on PC, 32 players on console, which was insane for 2005. The game takes place through legendary battles between the Rebels and the Empire from the iconic movies, playing as soldiers on either side, and even getting the ability to play as some of major characters from the movies, including Boba Fett and Han Solo, or as I know them, Peter Griffin and the Chicken. Now you have a rough idea about the game, let's take a look at the different versions. I want to start off by talking about the modes. Now while the PSP has an exclusive mode, this does come at the expense of some modes being removed, like the whole campaign mode is completely gone and replaced with a challenge mode, maybe to suit the fact that this was a portable console, so maybe having shorter missions suited the handheld better, but also to maybe help the game fit on that tiny UMD. Honestly, the campaign is a big loss, mainly down to the fact that playing this online is obviously no longer an option, which wouldn't have mattered anyway because the PSP didn't have online play and it was completely up to playing via System Link to play with other people. I actually did a bit more research just to see how much was cut, and yeah, there was quite a bit. It's a shame that so much had to go, like even some of the multiplayer maps, all the voice lines, and obviously the player count being brought down massively. But with all that being said, it's still a fun game to play on the PSP. The game still has Galactic Conquest, which put the multiplayer modes into this single player turn-based experience, where you command your fleet and also take part in the battles yourself. It's a great mode and an interesting way to bring multiplayer elements into the single player experience. Like I already mentioned, the PSP has a challenge mode, which is quite fun. You get given a task that you have to complete within a time limit, mainly taking out special enemy types. There's also a quick play mode where you can set up multiplayer matches with AI enemies, and it's a decent time, but obviously, like with any sort of bot multiplayer, the fun of playing against actual people is the reason these games are enjoyable, so once you take that out, there's only so much you can do, but the AI is still quite challenging. One of the most surprising things to stay in the game are space battles, which are essentially based on vehicle combat, flying around in some of the franchise's most iconic aircrafts. The mode also mixes that gameplay with the boots on the ground gameplay seamlessly, which is really surprising for a game from 2005, and it is crazy that some of these maps appear on the PSP version. But I'm not going to lie, these missions are where the console limitations are very visible, which brings me on to the next point. The graphics took a massive hit on the PSP, and I'm not surprised. To get a game with as large a scale as this to work on such a small system, the devs had to make sacrifices somewhere, and it's not dreadful, but the render distance makes you feel like you're playing a Silent Hill game, and the overall vibe of just pure chaos is gone due to the smaller player count. Look, playing versions side by side, the PSP version doesn't look great, but if you're putting it up against other PSP games at the time and what it was actually offering, nothing comes close to Battlefront 2. The controls, just like King Kong, have had to be moved around a bit to fit the PSP's lack of additional analog stick and triggers. The game offers different control schemes to give players a bit more variety, like the advanced control scheme gives you more options like the ability to roll, which you can't do with the basic controls. Even though you have to aim with the face buttons, the game has a very generous lock-on system, which will help you take out enemies a lot easier. Other than that, moving around and traversing the map and switching weapons felt fluid enough to still enjoy the game. Overall, the PSP version of this game is nowhere near the definitive edition. This game is so easy to play portably nowadays. You can get it on the Steam Deck, Nintendo Switch, and even PS2 emulators, so there really is no reason to play the PSP version. But for when it actually released, Battlefront 2 was so far ahead of anything on a portable gaming device that you can't look back at this port and not be impressed. Last but certainly not least is a game I honestly slept on for years, and that is Gun, or Gun Showdown on the PSP. This game is essentially an open world Wild West shooter, way before Red Dead Redemption. Don't get your hopes up, it's definitely not up to Red Dead Redemption levels. It does feel more comparable to Red Dead Revolver, if I'm being honest, but still a great Wild West shooter experience nonetheless. The game was surprisingly made by Tony Hawk series developer Neversoft in 2005, and just like King Kong came out in the early days of both the PSP and Xbox 360. In the game you play as Colton White, a young hunter working alongside his dad when an ambush on a steamboat sends him on a journey through different towns to uncover the secrets his dad Ned had been hiding. The game is open world, but again, don't expect Red Dead levels of exploration. The world is just there to connect a few points of interest, but the game does offer some innovative elements for the time. You can ride a horse, buy upgrades from a store, take on bounties, and even play poker in the local saloon. So in terms of content, it actually offers a decent amount. Playing through the story mainly on the PSP version, I actually enjoyed my time with it, but I couldn't help but feel I would have enjoyed it way more on the console version. It's not that the PSP version is terrible, but I'll be honest, the controls are a bit more janky than any other game I've played for this video. I'll start off with the combat. Whilst the hitboxes and aiming are quite generous, it doesn't help stop the fact that trying to aim and move at the same time is almost impossible, as the aim assist is so strong that it struggles to move the camera around. This is also a nightmare when riding the horse, but I'll be honest, riding the horse in either version is a struggle. I got stuck on the tutorial for both versions, which is no surprise when your horse thinks it's an extra in Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. Honestly, even though the controls take a bit of getting used to, the game is still a blast to play through, but I would recommend the console version, so the controls are a bit more forgiving. In terms of graphics, it obviously comes with a bunch of downgrades. The world feels a bit more barren in the PSP version, there's even a part of the tutorial race missing in the version. The world just doesn't look as fun to explore on the PSP, which is a shame. It also rips the cutscenes from the console version, which is quite funny because on the console, Cole, the main character, doesn't wear a hat, but on the PSP he does, so he ends up looking like a poorly timed magician. Such a shame that I finished the video on what seems a bit of a disappointment, but Gun is an interesting bit of history on the PSP, an open world Wild West shooter pre-Red Dead Redemption, a game that lets you explore the old towns of the Wild West, hunt animals, play poker and collect bounties way before John Marston ever did. And doing it all in the palm of your hands is quite impressive. I'm not going to finish the video off by saying Gun on the PSP is a bad game, because it's not. Back then this would have been a great way to experience it on the go. But of course nowadays there's way more options than ever before to play the console version. So if you've ever been curious about this hidden gem, I really do recommend it. But I recommend you try to get your hands on the console version. The game is actually available on Steam and playable on the Steam Deck. So there you go, you can play the better version portably nowadays. Honestly, it's a blast to play, but such a shame the PSP version is now showing its age quite a bit. So there we have it, 4 more of some of the most interesting ports on the PSP. I've spoken about 8 in total now, and I haven't even scratched the surface of what this absolute beast of portability had to offer. So please let me know in the comments down below if there's any ports I may have missed for a future video. I'm going to take a break from PSP ports over the next few months to cover some other topics, which I'm sure will still be just as interesting, so if you've enjoyed today, please consider liking the video and subscribing. That's it from me today, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you when I see ya.
Come out and play! I can't! I'm playing Nut! But there's Portable Nut! What? Yeah! It's a nut you can play with outside!
PSP. It's like a nut you can play with outside.